Radical feminists, on the other hand, say that liberals don't go far enough. Radical feminists are the ones that would be the ones that sometimes are stereotypically viewed as feminists. Um, the ones that somebody like Rush Limbaugh might call a feminazi. Those are people that might be considered to be radical feminists. Radical feminists believed that gender distinctions should disappear in favor of kind of a single androgynous personality type. Radical feminists back in the 70s proposed, unisex clothing, getting rid of male and female bathrooms at the ball games and things like that, getting rid of all male and female distinctions. The stuff that was not really workable for most people. I can remember in the 70s going to the mall, and there was a store there that had unisex clothing. And so it was just clothes. It was just pants and shirts. There wasn't a male side and a female side like there is now in a lot of stores. And it was not a good situation. If you bought those pants and you were a man, you would think, these don't fit me right. And if you bought them as a woman, you'd think, these don't fit me right. It was not a workable situation. It didn't make any sense. But radical ideas very often don't make perfect sense. What they do is they push us so that change occurs. So even though radical feminism may not be something that has been really workable and functional, it's a movement that pushes us to make changes. We rarely make changes in our culture unless there are some radical people, unless there are some people that go to the extremes to try to make us make changes. So radical feminism said liberals don't go far enough. Gender distinctions ought to go away. Radical feminists were really in favor of sexual liberation. That's particularly because they felt like female sexuality had always been oppressed by male-dominated culture. That women should be able to be completely and totally in charge of their sexuality. That includes what they wear, how they present themselves, how they look, whether they conform to societal kind of standards like wearing makeup or doing certain things with their hair or wearing bras or things like that. And also that kind of bleeds over also into a woman's right to choose and abortion rights and all the reproductive rights issues. Radical feminism, of course, then promotes drastic change in social institutions, not minor change. Minor change seems useless to the radical feminists. The radicals want big-time change and want it to occur quickly. Okay. Multicultural feminism is another view that you may or may not be aware of or may not have heard of ever before. Multicultural feminism says that feminism is really an issue that's about where you are and what affects you or those people that are really close to you in part of your life. You can't just lump all women and all feminist issues into one category and deal with it that way. Multicultural feminism says we should eliminate barriers that keep women from doing what they can do or being what they can be in specific places at specific times. So the nature of the oppression of women is really influenced by your ethnic group, your social class, your religious situation, different types of oppression. There's no one single portrait of the American woman that's appropriate. So with a multicultural viewpoint, the ideal woman is able to choose goals and lifestyles she thinks are appropriate for her. She speaks for herself and those that are in her same place. She is able to grow up and live in places and ways that eliminate barriers so that she can reach her potential, and that the barriers are different depending on the context. For example, my wife might think that we should have more female leadership in the church, and she does think that. So she might think that it's absolutely appropriate to have a woman who is a deacon or an elder in a church, a woman who's a pastor in a church. But some of you know this about us. We attend a church in Abilene that is it's called The Mission. It's a church mostly for poor and homeless people. I talked about it, I think, in the poverty video that I did. And our congregation is not terribly well educated, intellectual. There are a lot of folks who have not had opportunities to learn a lot of things or to be exposed to a lot of things kind of outside of their small world. And so, although we try to kind of be progressive and not just, stay exactly where we are and never grow and never learn, there are folks in our church for whom having female deacons or having a woman who's an elder or a woman who's a pastor might be a really hard thing for them to grasp because they just haven't been educated in that. And so my wife might say, for example, that yes, I really believe there should be female leadership in the church, but in my church at this particular time, in this context, I'm not going to push for that. And I'm not going to be upset about that, and I'm not going to fight for that because it's not that big a deal to me right now. Okay? On the other hand, if she found out that she was being paid less than a man for doing exactly the same job, that might be the kind of thing that she would say, I'm not going to put up with that. I'm going to go talk to someone about that. I'm going to see if I can get a change made there because that would be much more significant. And the price that she would pay for bringing it up might be worth the benefit. Whereas in our church, the price that we might pay for trying to make those kinds of changes might not be worth the benefit to her. But she makes that decision, whether she wants to stand up in a church meeting and say, we need female elders. And she could do that if she wanted to, but she might choose not to because the context is not important. Multicultural feminism kind of says that. You choose what's important to you in your context, in your setting, and you don't speak for everybody at one time, and we don't lump all women into just one group. This last one that I'm going to mention to you here is Marxist feminism. And again, this is just to show you that there are all of these different strains of feminism that may or may not make much difference to us. But Marxist feminism is the idea that economic systems keep women in their place. That capitalism is unjust because it puts ownership of production and distribution of goods and services in the hands of an elite few, and in our culture, that elite few is almost exclusively male. Okay, and it allows them to then exploit those underneath them, many of whom are very often female. Okay, the solution is to eliminate some of that structure so that oppression of workers is ended or the workers will revolt. So Marxist feminists would say then that the oppression of women is related to capitalism. It's related to the economic system, not just all this other stuff that we've talked about. And that women are part of that oppressed group, and that they either the system has to change or they will rise up at some point. Now, that's not terribly important to us, but it might be important to you. I throw it in here because I want to show you there are lots of different ways of thinking about feminism, and economics is certainly one of those. Now, what I want us to get to here at the end is this notion of a Christian feminism and whether you think we can do that or not. And there are a lot of issues and questions related to that. For example, issues of women in ministry and in the church. Can a woman be a pastor? Should a woman be a pastor? Can a woman teach men in the church? Can a woman be an elder or a deacon in a church? Can a woman be a primary worship leader in a church? So the woman's role in the church is a big deal. There are lots of issues and lots of questions there. Some of you in this class are, as I said before, really involved in that. That hits pretty close to home. So I want us to just think about that. And I have my opinions about that and the way that I feel about it, but I want you to think about what that means to you and whether you agree with or disagree with women in ministry and leadership in the church, and all of the things that maybe that means or doesn't mean to us. It also has something to do with reproduction and sexuality issues. We went through this big issue last year and the early part of this year with these ideas coming from managed care and the Obamacare stuff that was going to require places to provide birth control for women who were employees, and whether women have a right to that or not, or whether the church has to be involved in that or not, whether it's discriminating toward women to not provide that. Lots of reproductive issues, abortion, birth control, all those different things, and sexuality issues that are related to that. Are women in charge of their own sexuality? How are men, and how have men historically kind of been in charge of women's sexual activity? And is that appropriate or terribly inappropriate? And how do we change that? How has the church promoted that? How has the church supported that or maybe tried to fix it? It's a big, big deal.